And thank you so much for joining us. Today's Instagram Live is one of my favorite kind to host. We're going to talk about our Detect and Detox kit with someone who recently received their chemical exposure report. So today we're going to chat with Tiffany Rizer, a freelance graphic designer living in Oahu, Hawaii. We're going to discuss her experience with taking the test and answering some questions she had regarding her report. So I'm gonna Oh, here you are. Hi,
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. I think can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes, you're
Okay.
good. You're good.
Awesome.
Okay, tell us a little bit about yourself. I just gave a super brief intro about you.
Yeah. Well, there's not a whole lot to say. I live on Oahu and I'm just a freelance graphic designer. I work a lot with like nonprofits and startups and stuff like that. Um, and I've always really loved food and cooking, and probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, I started being more interested in healthy food and cooking foods that nourish us and stuff like that. So that was kind of, you know, the sphere that I live in on Instagram, and Million Marker kind of fell in my lap that way, which was fun.
This is so cool because you have such beautiful photos
Oh, thank you.
as your accounts. And
I always say Hawaii makes it easy. I think anybody could take great photos here. It's such a pretty place.
this is cool. What made you decide to use the Detect and Detox kit?
Well, I think I heard you go on a podcast. I'm not sure which one it was. But I listened to you talk about it on a podcast, and I was just talking to my husband about how cool it was that like you could have that done and you could, learn exactly what your levels are. Um, because I feel like you hear about like, studies that have been done in a clinical setting of, you know, the amount of plastic found in bodies, but I never thought that you could do that personally. So I just mentioned to him that I thought that was really cool, and so he actually gifted it to me. He bought it for my birthday because he could tell I was geeking out about it. So yeah, he got it for me.
This is so cool. So did you have any expectations going into it, and did you have any opinions as your results would be?
I really did not. I try to live a healthy lifestyle and I try to cut down on, my interactions with plastic, but I mean, I truly was like, we'll just see what the test results say. I didn't really have any big expectations for it. I hoped that like my levels would be low, but like I said, you kind of just never really know. So
Were you
I'm
scared?
really intrigued.
Okay. Were you scared or were you not?
I was a little scared. There are certain things that I know that I like interact with on a daily basis that are plastic. Just like, a plastic shower curtain. I think you had even mentioned in the podcast using like a Vitamix, which is
Mhm.
plastic, stuff like that, where, I really have no idea how much it's impacting me. So I feel like I was a little bit not scared to do the test, but I was just like, we'll find out. I have no idea what my levels are like. So
Right. Was there anything surprise you about the results once you received it?
I think I was most surprised by the fact that I could be really low in some areas and like
Mhm.
higher in others. I think that surprised me. I think I expected more of like, really similar across the board. Um, so yeah, I think that was the only like surprise I had in seeing my results.
Yeah, this usually have to do with people's different physiology because what we measure is the metabolites of these chemicals. So depending on how you're processing these
Interesting.
chemicals, people could have different spikes in different metabolites. Therefore, the levels could be different.
Gotcha. That's interesting.
I know you also have a few questions for me. You want to file the questions, and then we can make it this like interactive.
Yes, totally. I have them written down. Can I pull them up real quick?
Yes, go for
Okay.
it.
All right. Okay, so one of the questions, I don't know if anybody else has been seeing it, but I've been seeing in the news recently about how a lot of athleisure brands, like the big
Mhm.
ones like Lululemon and Nike, it's come out that there's a lot of BPA and
Yeah.
harmful chemicals in those products. Do you feel like that's something that we should be pretty worried about, or do you feel like it's, there are different levels of consumption, obviously, like things that are on our skin versus being ingested? Just what are your thoughts on that?
So I think that's something it's really hard for us to control. I don't think manufacturers intentionally add BPA or these things into the bra or other like clothing, but it's during the manufacturing process, it could be contaminated, or it could be the sources, it could be the manufacturing equipment. So
Mhm.
that part is really, really hard to control. But what we can control is the amount of time that we're wearing these athleisure stuff. For example, only wear it during when you're working out, and then
Mhm.
when you're not working out, okay, wear something else.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously anything intimate to your body, that will be the top place to trying to avoid. I just say like I wouldn't think like bra is, I mean it's important because it's next to breast, but
Mhm.
I think all other feminine hygiene products are way more important because it's very porous down there,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you definitely don't want these things to get in. So think about, organic clothing, organic cotton clothing, underwear, and also thinking about your tampon or any of the feminine hygiene products. So I think those are much, much more important.
Awesome. I know, because we live in a day and age where it's just kind of overwhelming to know how to get it out of everything that's, touching our bodies. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, do I need to go throw out my Nikes and Lululemons, or do I have bigger fish to fry? So that's good to know.
Yeah,
Uh,
and then making sure you use good detergent to wash these clothing, because that's another area we see where people have high exposures is they use the laundry detergent they use probably is having fragrance or having other chemicals in it. So making sure that you use a good laundry detergent while you're washing these things too.
mhm. Mhm. Awesome. Okay, another question I had was, I also just learned that a lot of the paper cups, like paper to go cups that people use for coffee, is lined with like a plastic coating. So I thought that I was being better by like drinking a hot coffee instead of drinking out of a plastic cold cup. But is it actually worse? I don't know if you have a take on that.
It depends. So I think the best way is obviously before COVID, where we can bring our own mug and use that way. Um, it's really hard to say whether paper cups is actually better than plastic cups or other things. I think environmentally, at least paper cups is from recycled material. At least we're helping a little bit that way. But in terms of human health, sometimes it's really hard to tell whether which one is better.
Hmm.
I also would suggest people to, if you get to a coffee shop, you can bring your own mug. Definitely do that. If you have to use a paper cup, okay, fine, use a paper cup, but also pay attention on the lid. What we have also seen is the lid many times is using a much lower grade plastic. So if you
Gotcha.
imagine you're drinking that hot cup of coffee, even though your cup is paper, but that lid is
Hmm.
plastic. And that lid is usually made of a cheaper material, which is many times, if you can see the recycling symbol on the
Hmm.
lid, it's usually a 7 on a cup, which means other. It could be anything. And then you just
Yeah.
imagine that hot liquid going through that lid and then
Yeah.
drinking it. So I
Interesting.
would drink it without that lid.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, because doesn't the heat of something interact with the plastic and make it more?
Yes, so the heat will actually increase the releasing of the chemical in the plastic. That's why we tell people never ever microwave plastics, because the heat will make it leach out so much more.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So paper coffee cup, no lid if you can't bring your own. That's good to know. Um, okay. Let me see what else I had here. So I live in kind of a small apartment, and it's also my home office. And one of the things that I was researching once I got my report back was, the different ways that we interact with phthalates. And one of the things I came across was vinyl wood flooring, which my apartment is covered in. So just, I don't know if you know anything about you know, how good or bad that is for you, or anything, if that could be contributing.
It could be contributing. Vinyl flooring is one of the highest sources of phthalate exposure, especially high molecular phthalates, which you have a slightly elevated level.
Right.
That's a hard piece to change, because if you you didn't build this apartment, right? It's like
Right.
it's already built. You can't like tear out the floors and then
Yeah.
change the new one. If you're thinking about, buying a house or remodeling, yes,
Mhm.
that would be a long-term plan. That's something that people should definitely think about is then, swap out the vinyl flooring to either engineering wood or hardwood.
Mhm.
And also pay attention on like the polishing of the wood because epoxy and other home finishing material could also have these chemicals. So it's more of a long-term plan. But for
Yeah.
now, because you can't really change it, I wouldn't stress out too much about it.
Mhm.
Some of the strategies to avoid the exposure, if you think about it, you're like touching the floor, right? So
Mhm.
if you are not barefoot, then that
Mhm.
kind of prevents exposure a bit. I would wear a pair of socks, for
Oh.
example, when you're walking on the floor instead of barefoot.
Mhm.
And also a lot of these vinyl flooring, they could be generating a lot of dust too. So dust
Mhm.
will carry phthalates. So dusting often is also another strategy to avoid.
I could definitely dust more. Probably getting me. Um, there was another something else I was going to say about that. Oh, we have like a molecule air purifier. Does that help at all, or is that kind of not going to address the problem of the vinyl flooring?
I'm not super familiar how effective molecule is, but I've heard good things about it. But in general, it helps.
Okay.
So, in general, because if you think about it, we're actually getting exposed to so many things at once, and then we spend a lot of time indoor. So
Hmm.
having an indoor air purifier is always a good thing. Just make sure you change the filter,
Okay.
accordingly. Otherwise, you wouldn't be filtering out, because a lot of these chemicals they also could interact with each other.
Hmm.
So when you have multiple exposures, then it kind of they could add up.
Right. Right. Okay. Um. Okay. Here's another question. So I know that there are a lot of like fertility issues born out of um, plastics and the consumption of plastics. Do you find that it's passed down? Like, are there more issues with babies that have to do with it, or is it mainly an issue for the person, carrying a child or trying to conceive?
Oh, it passed down. So for the
Really?
longest time, we thought, first of all, these chemicals wouldn't pass blood-brain barrier. It
Hmm.
passes. And then we thought it wouldn't pass placental barrier. It passes. So what we have seen, at least in animal studies, that these chemicals impact two generations behind. So meaning like, yeah, your exposure will actually impact your grandkids' exposure.
Wow.
So very, very important. That's why we
Yeah.
want people who are, trying to conceive and then being pregnant, really pay attention on these chemicals so that
Mhm.
your kid and your grandkids would have lower exposures.
Yeah, that's wild and really scary.
It's wild and really scary. Yeah, the issue is that these chemicals are not going to kill you tomorrow, right? You don't really fear anything, but
Mhm.
you just don't know down the road what kind of impact it could have.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, that's good to know. Um, so then I think my only other two questions kind of have to do with my report. So I had higher levels of the high MW phthalates,
Hmm.
in comparison to the low MW phthalates. Are you able to just tell me the difference between those and if one is worse than the other?
They're both equally bad.
Okay.
Uh, that's the bad news.
Yeah.
But the good news is the low molecular weight phthalates are easier to change compared to high molecular weight phthalates. So the reason we categorize them as low or high is because the sources are different. So low molecular weight phthalates are usually coming from personal care products, vitamins, as well as household products, versus
Okay.
the high molecular weight phthalates are usually in plastics.
Okay.
So for your low molecular weight phthalates, you can simply already swapping out a few products, and you could pretty much have a lower exposure level. So to
Mm-hmm.
spot out, in the end of the report, we have a whole product audit section
Mm-hmm.
and spot all the fragrance, swap out all the fragrance ones
Yeah.
with fragrance as ingredient. That's like top one. And also oftentimes anything with fragrance, they also occur with many other harmful chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
So by avoiding one ingredient, you can already avoid many things. So that's for low molecular phthalates. For high molecular phthalates, the vinyl fluorine could be one.
Yeah.
Second is the takeout containers. Um, One thing we recently found out is a lot of these phthalates are also in food preparation gloves. So if you eat out a lot, if a food preparation person use a glove to prepare your food, and then things could just leach into your food. So avoiding takeout is another one. Trying to eat, cooking at home, especially you love cooking.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
cooking at home is always good.
That's crazy. So, and I imagine, pretty much every restaurant you're eating in, they're using plastic gloves. So it's crazy just how many parts of our lives it
It should
touches.
definitely regulate it, and I think this is the part we really don't want people to be overwhelmed because
Right.
they are everywhere, but you do what you can.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. All right. Good to know. Um, okay, let me see if there's anything else here. Is there any way to speed up the process of getting rid of the chemicals that are in you?
So the chemicals we're testing currently, we call them transient chemicals. Your body, if you eliminate the sources, your body's supposed to get rid of them within 24 to 48 hours, which is
Okay.
very, very encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
A few things that you can do to potentially speed up or help with the detox process. One is make sure yourself is hydrated, because we literally get rid of them through urine. So if you don't pee, then you can't get rid of them, right? So make sure you're hydrated. The second is think about like how you evaporate kind of water. Exercise is another good one. So if you exercise a lot, you sweat a lot, then you can also sweat out toxins. And then the lastly is making sure that you eat, obviously not being stressed out, and eat a balanced meal full of antioxidants. These are more supportive functions of your detox system. So these are the strategies that I would take. But also pay attention on, even though this report we test for transient chemical, but also pay attention on persistent chemicals. So persistent chemicals are what we're talking about. They stay in your body for a long time. One thing you might have heard of is the PFAS, the forever chemical.
Right.
So why we call them forever chemical is your body doesn't get rid of them for a long time. So for those, definitely avoid exposure. So think about your kitchenware, your like waterproofing clothing, these things, trying to avoid those.
Mm-hmm. Is the like kitchen pans, that's primarily where people interact with it, right?
PFAS is also another thing that's like everywhere, but
Yeah.
the kitchen pans is something that we can control of.
Yeah.
Should have a control of. And the water filter will help.
Okay. Okay. And for pans, do you just recommend like stainless steel and cast iron, those kind of things?
Stainless steel and cast iron are my to-go ones. Ceramics are generally good too. My issue with ceramic is they don't last as long. Ceramic pans, usually you use it for a couple years, then that's it. And then that just going to the waste. Versus cast iron, you can actually use it for a long, long, long time. And then once you season it well, it wouldn't stick. It's just heavy.
Right. Yeah. I know. I recently got a cast iron, and it's a whole separate baby. Okay, were there any major red flags? I know, like when you look at a report, I have a limited knowledge, so when I look at my report, I can glean certain amounts, but were there red flags that you saw that, I should maybe start by cleaning up those first?
I think the personal care is probably the easiest one to clean. And then also, you asked a great question about vinyl flooring. So
Yeah.
making sure, wear socks and dust often. I think
Mhm.
that's another one to pay attention of. And lastly is we didn't talk much about paraben. You do have one paraben that has a slightly elevated level. That's usually used as preservatives in both food as well as personal care products. Even though none of your products actually have paraben showed up, there could be cross contamination. And also, like again, this goes back to any plastic packaging or packaged food, because parabens are not even labeled as parabens in packaged food. It's labeled as something completely different. So that's something else to pay attention of. And in the report, we also list 4 different kinds of parabens, because not all parabens are created equal. So the methyl is less toxic compared to the butyl at the end. And one area we always tell people is if you use a over-the-counter ornament or cream, that's one area we have not been able to find good alternatives without paraben formulation. So if you are choosing a ornament and then you read your labels, obviously always read labels. If you have a methyl paraben in the ingredient versus a butyl paraben in the ingredient, pick the methyl, not the butyl, because the toxicity is different.
Interesting. I know. I think about like all the things that come wrapped in plastic, even when we cook at home, like chicken breasts and stuff like that, it's all literally touching plastic. So that's hard. Um, there's something else I was going to ask. Do you find that like canned items safe, or should I be looking for glass? What's your take on that?
Glass, please. So
Glass.
canned item, this is touching on something we call it regrettable substitutes. So, cans are usually lined with BPA. Because BPA has been banning in all the baby food, now you see a lot of cans like BPA free. But BPA free doesn't mean it's BPS, BPF, BPAF. So these alternatives that manufacturer has been using, we don't really know if they're free. So it's always better just to avoid.
Right, right. And are there sources like certain grocery stores that you find have better options as far as getting food with less plastic packaging? Kind of have
Any
to.
stores with you can buy bulk, it's always a good thing. So if you just think about it, if you buy bulk, there's like less surface area touching plastic, right? Less
Right.
packaging. So if you can buy bulk, I would buy bulk. And then also shop at farmers market is always a good option. So then
Mhm.
you can bring your own bag and less packaging.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, those things all help. I think that's kind of all the questions I had.
Wonderful.
It was super interesting to do. I, loved the ease of the test, and the one funny thing that happened was, and for anybody who might take it in the future, was I took it to FedEx and, handed the lady my package, and she was like, "And what's in here?" That's quickly tell her a medical sample, and she kind of, threw it back a little bit. So if you take the test, maybe just put it in the Dropbox.
Okay. Okay, that's really good to know.
Yeah.
The good thing is the urine is actually not considered a biohazard material. That's
Right.
why we are able to ship it. And then
Yeah.
because we use FedEx priority overnight shipping, we want to make sure your sample gets to the lab as soon as it can.
Yeah.
But yeah, one thing we also tell people is make sure you ship between Monday through Thursday because on the weekend then you can't avoid the sample delay. So because FedEx doesn't deliver on a weekend,
Right.
so we want to make sure the sample gets to the lab on a Friday instead
Yeah.
of like 4 days on the road.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was nervous about that shipping it from Hawaii, but I had no issues. So it went great.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing with us this.
Thank you for letting me know what's inside my body. It's super cool. I hope lots of people get the chance to do it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I will be following your progress then.
Awesome. Thank you. Great to talk to you.
Bye.
Bye.